There we go.
Here we go. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. If any of you decide to watch this, otherwise we're talking to a vacuum, which is okay too.
It's not the first time for me, so.
I'm Patrick Jordan. I run a Substack called Tech and Nonsense. My colleague here is going to introduce himself in a second, is Daniel Nest, who runs Why Try AI on Substack. Daniel and I I know I like his content on Substack. We chat and comment on each other's stuff on Substack, and we're experimenting. This is our second episode already here in doing these little bite-sized chats about AI topics that are interesting to us at the moment. So over to you.
Yeah, I think you've actually done a phenomenal job. I have not much to add. I'm Daniel, Why Try AI, and Patrick and I are just trying to see where this kind of unscripted chat takes us, and here we are for the second time.
All right. So we'll get sophisticated maybe and add links later on, but we did do a first one of these, by the way, on Google's new Learn About offering, which is a sort of educational one. This is our second one, and we are going to talk about the idea or the fact that over recent weeks, there's been a whole lot of reporting about the idea that these large language models, or LLMs, that power chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and so on, are facing a sort of hitting a limit on their progress for a few reasons. There's nothing left to train on. They've sucked in all the information that's out there on the internet, the good, the bad, the ugly, and so forth. The cost of computing power, the massive amounts of computing power required to train these models, the massive, even more massive amounts of energy, resources for data centers and cooling of data centers and so forth to power these models. And on the side of that, both of us have read some other articles which talk about how there are other paths to continuing to improve these models. And there are researchers out there, and there are the big company players in this market, from Meta to Google to OpenAI and so forth, who are discovering other methods of continuing to improve these models where there's not such a demand on compute power and energy and further internet type data to train them on. So I think we wanted to talk about two things that come off the main news item. One is, are we believers that, that's the end? These models are probably not going to improve one single bit over the next year or two. And then if that's true, if that turned out to be true, like where they're at right now is just where they're going to be stuck for a while. How much do we care? How much does that impact our daily use of them? So why don't you start us off, Daniel, and what do you think about how likely are these models to be just stuck where they're at for the next year or two?
Right. So clearly, I'm not an AI researcher, so I'm not in these circles. So everything that you and I are exposed to is what we read by people who know more than us. And I've, ever since these rumors started coming up, I tried to read the whole breadth of opinions here. And they range from, as I give you an example, Gary Marcus has always been skeptical about the current LLM crop. And he's always been saying, guys, we're going to hit a wall. We've been hitting a wall for a while. And now he's going, aha, I told you so. We're done. LLMs are a finished kind of concept, and we should stop throwing money at them. And all the way to dreamers who are like, scaling works, and we're going to be doing AGI in 2026. We're going to be run by robots. And then I read the whole spectrum of opinions, and I think the consensus opinion seems to be, and it's probably maybe represented by another Substacker called Devansh, who writes artificial intelligence made simple. And he basically says, I agree with Gary Marcus that LLMs are not the only approach. We cannot only invest in LLMs. We are going to get to a point where it's not going to be feasible, even if it's possible, it's not going to be feasible both energy-wise, but also economically, to throw money at training these models and get something out of them. And also the rate of return is diminishing, as we said. I think the rumor started because we're all waiting for GPT-5. And right now, the rumors are saying, yes, it's going to be better than GPT-4, but it's not going to be anywhere close to the jump we saw from 3.5 to 4. So 4 to 5 is going to be a more modest jump based on what we know so far. And for some people, it's like, that's it, LLMs are done, let's pack it up and go home, which I think is a bit premature because, as many people argue, yes, maybe we can run out of things what we can do in terms of training phase, but there is also such a thing as inference, which is what happens afterwards, and potentially OpenAI's O1 models are the first glimpse of that. What happens if you put the tokens, you front load them when the chat happens and give the model time to think through things, and even with the same architecture and the same training that it has, it gets to a higher kind of reasoning plateau. So that's one potential avenue, but I know there are probably dozens of them which say that even if LLMs stay where they are, we can integrate them in other ways, we can use them in other ways, we can actually use smaller LLMs for specialized things and do this mixture of experts stuff. So there are many, many ways we can get more out of them without having this more massive training and having fundamental proprietary models that are just capable of everything on their own. Neurosymbolic AI is something that Gary Marcus likes himself, and that's the one that takes the best of both worlds. You have an LLM, and then you have a kind of more traditional system that knows how logic works and so on, and they kind of piggyback on each other's strength to have a better whole. So I think the overall consensus is, I don't think we're close to even stopping to see progress on this. Yes, we might stop seeing progress for a while in the training of the models, but there are so many avenues to explore that will get us to a better way of reasoning and using these systems that we haven't even explored and haven't even started seeing yet.
Yeah, I tend to be right there on the same sort of page as you. I've seen similar, and I think even historically, I remember. It feels like AI years are like dog years. Whatever it is, it feels like this was 6 months ago. It probably was 12 months ago. But I remember when Mistral, the open source LLM from France, was like a pesky little underdog. It was very underpowered compared to the bigger names, but it was producing great results. It was competing well with them, and it still is. Microsoft has a couple, small models, the PHI, models, which are also producing good results. So I agree with you. I think there are some promising, and that's just one, that's just smaller models. As you mentioned, there's a number of different ways that are being looked at by these bigger companies, by academic teams and researchers and so forth. And I think even this idea that the jump from GPT-4 to GPT-5 is going to disappoint people. It's not groundbreaking and exponential like 3.5 to 4 was. I'm sort of in the who cares category on that. I feel like, but even while people are saying this, we're seeing Claude can now interact with your computer. ChatGPT is about to add that same feature. I just downloaded their Mac app yesterday. ChatGPT is one because that feature is coming, and
Google teased something similar as well. So we are getting into this agent phase where they're going to be operating things. Same intelligence, same models, but they're going to be able to do more.
Right, and it still feels to me as if it's very, very continual basis. Certainly feels like every week. Gemini has a new feature, ChatGPT has a new feature, Claude does, the others do. So if for some people that's a huge slowdown, it's not a slowdown that bothers me as a day-to-day user.
And I think the reason some of this is happening is because, with good reason, like people like Sam Altman and like people who are writing these big programs, they kind of hyped themselves into this corner where they said, oh, it's coming, AGI is coming, and everybody's waiting with bated breath that GPT-5 is just going to be an insane advancement. And seen in that light and using that as a benchmark, we can say that's probably going to be a disappointment. If you were sitting there waiting that GPT-5 is going to be the ultimate product that's going to solve everything. You might be disappointed that it's only just better by whatever what's going to be. But when you look at it fundamentally, the fact that there is forward momentum, that indicates that we haven't yet run out of steam, and there are still so many ways to explore. But the second thing you mentioned, and I don't know how much time we have, but let's imagine the absolute worst case scenario. Let's say we have hit an absolute wall. There is no avenue to explore. LLMs are never going to get better. That's it. This is today stops. All development stops forever today in LLMs. And then I am with Ethan Mollick on this. Ethan Mollick, the Wharton professor, who is probably very well known to whoever is listening to this. He writes about AI in a lot of detail. And he famously said in his book and elsewhere that even if you stop advancing these models tomorrow, and he said that already half a year ago when things weren't as advanced as they were now, and he said, we still have up to like a decade or so of actually integrating these models in meaningful ways in businesses, in our society. So there is so many kind of low-hanging fruits here that are going to get us to observe and integrate these models in a way that's going to let us see results, even if the models themselves do not advance any further. So I'm in the kind of optimist camp here in terms of, let's not look at the scaling and the fact that scaling loss might not work or whatever, but what does it mean for the average Joe, for you and me, who is going to be using these models and the products we're going to start seeing? There is lots of untapped potential here, I think.
I agree, and you and I chatted a little before. We're both, or I certainly classify myself as a big fan of Ethan Mollick's writing, his book Co-Intelligence, and his Substack, One Useful Thing, I believe it's called. He says, always invite AI to the table, involve it in everything you do, and I'm a big believer in that. I am also an optimist. And again, back to this idea, I feel like everything you said about the business level of integrating AI, I agree with wholeheartedly. And then taking it down to a personal perspective, I feel like if I wake up tomorrow and it becomes just a factual thing that these models will not advance at all for the next 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, I feel like I have more learning to do to get the most out of these models. Honestly, I'm just catching up. So I'm not going to be desperately disappointed that we didn't reach AGI.
On some level, maybe we'll be a little bit happy that we can take a breath for a second instead of seeing like one new groundbreaking model every single day. Like, let's stop and see how we can actually put to use the ones we already have. Because right now it's just constantly running, right? We're constantly getting like more things you can use. And I'm like, how about we take what we already have and get people to...
Exactly, because you might be like, the way you said that, you might be like, because I'm terrible. I'm like, oh, new shiny thing. Let me go here. I need to go try that. Claude just said it can do this. Oh, man. Stop the press. I got to go.
But what you said, like that you know that you have lots of learning to do and you can get more out of these models if they never advance. You are basically a microcosm of what Ethan Mollick is talking about for the society as a whole. And there are a bunch of Patricks up there who can upscale themselves on how to use this models, and businesses that can do the same, so that we can continue seeing productivity gains, creativity gains, whatever it might be, from the current crop of models, even if they never advance. So,
that's another of the big takeaways I took. We have about 2.5 minutes, by the way, on our own little timer here. But that's another of the big takeaways I got from Mollick's writing is, spend enough time with each of these models that you want to learn what they're best at, what they're not so great at. So you begin to know, if I want to do X, I always, I primarily want to work with Claude. If I want to do Y, I primarily want to work with Gemini, or whichever way it plays out. And I just feel like there's so much uncharted ground there for me, or ground that I've only just started to get into, that I've got plenty of room. These models could stop progressing today, and I'm not going to feel like I'm at any kind of cap for a long while.
No, absolutely.
So
I'm on the same boat. And I mean, you and I are, maybe you could say, we are representing the people who are in this space and working with it. And I mean, as a function of having to write once a week a roundup of news about AI, I am kind of constantly reading and feeding myself with content. And even I don't feel that, I have begun to scratch the surface of some of this stuff. And we can assume that there are many people out there who are not nearly as interested in AI, or maybe even anti-AI, and eventually they will come on board.
Or just don't have the time
or
to
just,
play around
just
with it.
yeah, it's not their
Yeah,
primary
whatever.
concern and focus. And those people will at some point get on board when these products become more ubiquitous. They're going to be built into the whatever ecosystem they're using, whether it's Apple or Google or whatever. And they're going to be exposed more and more and finding out their ways of using these products. So there is just probably, like Ethan said, yeah, it's a decade, if not more, of us catching up to the potential of the models. Go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say, I think we're coming down to a little under a minute. I think we could safely say, and you tell me if you agree, I think we could say that our general take is anytime these models keep improving, that's great. It'll be another thing to experiment with. If they stop improving, it's really not an issue. There's plenty to be learned from them and learned about how to get the best out of them in the meantime anyway.
Exactly. I think that's a great sum up.
Okay.
Where we're at.
All right. Perfect. Well, I think we fit right into our timing on that one. That's our bite-sized for today.
All right. Bye-bye.
Wow.